Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everybody. Today, have a really fun show for you guys. As you can see, the home run tracker for Solo Shot Swag keeps going up by over 100 every single week. Don't want to say, but 1,000 is looking like a real possibility before June hits, and that's a really awesome thing. Home run numbers have been up despite the restrictions of the shift. And there's been a lot of amazing performances, teams that have gotten out to really hot starts. But a team that I had a lot of faith in going into the season, the Texas Rangers. They lose Jacob deGrom, who is great as he is, has been having trouble with staying on the field. The best ability is availability. He's going to miss another 2 or 3 weeks, Bruce Bochy said. I hope to see him on the field soon. But I didn't just pick the Texas Rangers to bounce back and make the playoffs because of Jacob deGrom. I picked it because last offseason, they upgraded the hitting by bringing in Corey Seager and Marcus Semien in the middle of the infield. Marcus Semien, first leadoff hitter in baseball with over 30 RBIs. But because of the pitching upgrades, not just Jacob deGrom, but bringing in Martin Perez last year, who was an all-star, bringing in Andrew Heaney, John Gray, Jacob deGrom, and nasty Nathan Eovaldi. As a Red Sox fan, I've gotten to see this man at the height of his powers, and he might have even leveled up with this contract. He has a lot to prove. He seems to have a chip on his shoulder. He's also a pitcher like deGrom, who has had struggles in the past with injuries, but now that he's been a consistent starter, getting that opportunity, he's been dealing. And he's someone that I think the pitch clock has helped a lot because he likes to work fast, and the movement and speed on his pitches, it's been really awesome to watch. 28 2/3 scoreless inning streak. He just had a career high 12 strikeouts in his last start, and he is becoming the true ace of the Texas Rangers. Even when Jacob deGrom comes back, it's looking like Nate Eovaldi might be the one in that 1-2 punch. So I wanted to highlight Nasty Nate because when I look at this Red Sox roster and I'm watching them, they're having a really nice run. The one question mark has been pitching. Brian Bayo just had his best start of the season. Nick Pivetta struggled yet again. And right now they are kind of anchored to these 3 old pitchers who don't have any minor league options in Chris Sale, Corey Kluber, and James Paxton, who made his debut last night, the first time he's pitched in a couple years. Those 3 guys, they're going to give you more good days than bad, I think. But it doesn't give you a lot of options when you're trying to win. You're trying to see what you have in some younger guys. You have Garrett Whitlock and Cutter Crawford as guys that you've been bouncing back and forth between the bullpen and the rotation. Tanner Houck as well looks to be going to the bullpen. Nate Eovaldi and Tigers ace Eduardo Rodriguez. You see these pitchers that were on this Boston staff for that 2018 title team. And that's been the missing link for this Boston team, where I've moved them up the power rankings considerably, but they are not quite where they need to be because of the pitching. It's going to hold them back, I think, in a lot of ways. It's why I haven't been too bullish on their rise. I've moved them up considerably, but not pushing the top 10 just yet, because if they had a guy like Nasty Nate or Eduardo Rodriguez at the top of that rotation where you know you're getting consistent starts every time, I'd feel a lot better about that Red Sox team. And the Texas Rangers and Detroit Tigers' success is predicated to having consistent ace starters like that at the top of the rotation. Moving it down to first base, a little somber. We've lost a couple MVPs in this past week and a half. April 27th, we lost Pirates and Cardinals great Dick Groat, who was the 1960 National League MVP, where he won the batting title that year, hitting .325 for the first place Pirates, who obviously went on to upset the Yankees in the World Series with Bill Mazeroski's walk-off home run to win the entire championship there. And he was also instrumental in the 1964 Cardinals World Series run, right after Stan Musial retired and that young nucleus of players really came together with Ken Boyer and Bob Gibson. And Dick Groat was a huge part of that World Series title. A shortstop that really gets overlooked, had a really nice career. And what a lot of people don't know about him is he was actually drafted into the NBA. He was a very good high school and college basketball player and just a really above average athlete all around, getting to play in the NBA. And the Pittsburgh Pirates eventually saying that you had to give up your basketball dreams and focus on baseball entirely. You don't get to see that kind of stuff a lot in professional sports. There's been a handful of guys that have played multiple professional sports, but Dick Groat, rest in peace, famous Pitt basketball broadcaster, as well as just an all-time great human being and shortstop. Pittsburgh and St. Louis have shown their love for you, but wanted to put some national recognition on the loss of Dick Groat, as well as last Solo Shot Saturday. Not many hours after I published my podcast, we lost Vita Blue, who was also a Cy Young and MVP in his monster 1971 season, where he went 24-8 with a 1.82 ERA. And at the time, Vita Blue was a second-year player, really looked to have the stuff of a dominant ace. And I was so excited to see how people would react to the loss of Vita Blue. There was nothing to disappoint. So many people looked up to him and said he was their favorite pitcher growing up, Major League players, Hall of Famers. He was just a dominant left-hander with powerful stuff. And honestly, if it weren't for his drug problems, very well could have been in the Hall of Fame himself one day. Vita Blue passed away at the age of 73 last Saturday. Rest in peace to those MVPs. You played in smaller markets, but baseball will always remember you. Now, I'm wearing my Cardinals shirt. This is an organization that I gave the benefit of the doubt to for many years of my life. My favorite player, Albert Pujols, played the majority of his career in St. Louis. But we got to talk about the Cardinals. St. Louis, we have a problem. Despite you guys finally starting to play a little bit better, this team is not what they were kind of advertised to be. You had two of the top three players in the National League last year in Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. Nolan Arenado looks to be playing through some sort of back or shoulder injury because the power has not been there, and you've seen at times that he kind of winces in pain, making certain movements, both offensively and defensively. And Paul Goldschmidt, who had a career year to win his first MVP last year, has been good, but nothing near the pace that he was on last season. And I think the real problem, before we get into the pitching of the St. Louis Cardinals, is they have so many guys that are basically quadruple A players. They're too good to be left in the minor leagues, but they're not consistent enough to be everyday major league players. Jordan Walker was my National League Rookie of the Year pick, and he's been sent down just because of the options. Lars Nootbaar, Tyler O'Neill, Dylan Carlson, the list goes on and on. These guys do not play consistently. One week they'll be super hot, and the next week they'll be hitting a buck something. Those guys need to get it together. A lot of things were made up about them not trading for Juan Soto last trade deadline because it would take one or two of those outfielders away. But I think the St. Louis Cardinals team would have been better for it, having Juan Soto in between Arenado and Goldschmidt in that lineup instead of piecing it together with all of these guys that are good, but they're not great everyday players. They're not all-star caliber guys. And that's really a shame because the St. Louis Cardinals faithful are some of the best fans in baseball. And I hate to have to rain on the parade. I know it's already been a disappointing season. This is the worst start they've had in years, and they haven't had back-to-back losing seasons since the mid-90s. They've been a pillar of consistency in baseball, and a lot of that has to do with Yadier Molina. Almost 20 years in the same uniform. He was more than a catcher. He was the pitching coach in a lot of ways. He was the assistant manager in a lot of ways. And his hole behind the plate has been glaring for the pitching staff. He didn't give you a lot with the bat, but this pitching staff has been awful this year. I think part of it is that they weren't willing to add to it during the offseason by trade or by signing. They kind of just stuck with what they had. They said Adam Wainwright will give us quality starts. Miles Mikolas was an all-star last year. Jordan Montgomery pitched like an all-star in the second half. And we have Jack Flaherty coming back from injury and some other guys to piece it together. But when you take your all-star catcher signing in Wilson Contreras and you say he's not going to be catching for a little while, he's going to be a DH, you're basically wasting a roster spot with that signing. I understand if you look at the numbers since they made the change and Andrew Kisner back there catching, there has been an improvement in the pitching numbers. So if that continues to be the case, it's still the wrong move because you're wasting a roster spot on Wilson, who, even if he isn't a great defensive catcher, during spring training and during the season, he needs to be sitting down with guys and learning how to call their game, pitch to those guys' strengths. And just seeing an organization like St. Louis have these kind of distractions, whether it was the Tyler O'Neill situation where he didn't hustle home and got benched the next day, or you see Jack Flaherty telling a reporter that I guess you don't know how to pitch and being clearly frustrated with everything that's going on. And then Wilson Contreras, your big offseason signing, becoming a DH and you guys just not allowing him to catch. I get some of that is on Wilson Contreras, but it's just a bad look for an organization that hasn't had a lot of bad looks in a long time. I've dropped them just about as low as I possibly could have them in my power rankings. And it is a total shame that they are going around and just playing below average baseball. I understand they had a nice series against the Cubs, but the Cubs have been in the same ranking range for me the entire season because they're the league average team. Signing Dansby Swanson and the pitching that they've had, they are the definition of a 500 baseball team, a very solid team. So seeing that is totally understandable. And I know that going forward, they're going to be better. And hopefully at least give the fans something to cheer for. With the hole they've put themselves in, with the Cubs improving to a league average team, with the Pirates looking like a better than league average team, and Milwaukee, who I almost had in my playoff picture, had them winning some awards this season. They've been struggling their last 10, but the pitching and offense is playoff caliber. I fully expect the St. Louis Cardinals to continue the struggle, even if they are on a better path. Nolan Arenado's got to get right, and that pitching staff needs somebody to step up desperately, whether that is by trade, by calling up top prospect Matthew Liberatore. The Cardinals need help. And it's really sad. They've been my National League team that I listen to most and care for the most because of my fandom for Albert Pujols, and seeing them go from a team that's always in it to a team that's not even close right now. It is a real shame. And I hope for those fans in St. Louis that things get better soon. When we round third base here, we like to throw it back to a moment in baseball history on this date, May 13th, and just relive one of baseball's amazing moments. And because I bashed on the Cardinals so much in this episode, reluctantly, for throwback third base, we are going to bring it up with a highlight of St. Louis Cardinals legend Stan the Man Musial, who on this day in 1958 became the 8th member of the 3,000 hit club. Stan Musial is one of the greatest baseball players that ever lived, but people don't talk about him enough. He got his 3,000th hit at 37 years old and played another 5 years in the league, where he acquired another 500 hits to get over 3,600 for his career, as well as another 30 homers, a couple hundred RBIs in his 40s. And when you talk about his 3,000th hit at 37 years old, he came in as a pinch hitter for this moment, back before it was a big spectacle to get your 3,000th hit. And he hit a pinch hit double off of Cubs reliever Mo Drabowski in a comeback effort to help the Cardinals win. Stan Musial was a 3-time MVP and finished second in MVP voting 4 other years. So he could have had as many as 7 MVPs, and he does have as much as 7 batting titles in his career. He was such a great hitter, and despite not being known for his power, finished his career with 475 home runs and over 1,900 runs driven in. I think the biggest thing that holds Stan Musial back from being remembered as one of those inner circle greats and being one of the greatest hitters that ever lived is that during his playing days, almost year for year, there was a left-handed hitter in Boston, the splendid splinter Ted Williams, who was doing everything Musial did, but with more power. And he was larger than life to a lot of people. Stan Musial was a married man, very quiet, and just loved to play baseball. Versus Ted Williams, who was more distant and skilled in many ways as a pilot, as a fisherman. Just a more interesting case study than a Stan Musial. But Stan Musial, on this day in 1958, was the 8th member of the 3,000 hit club before it was cool, ladies and gentlemen, before it was a watch party for the entire world. Stan Musial came in to help his team win as a pinch hitter, got his 3,000th hit, and the Cardinals ended up winning that game 5-3 after being down 3-2. Do yourself a favor, whether you're listening to this right now or after the fact, and go look up Stan Musial's baseball reference page. You'll see a lot of black for leading the league, and you'll see some numbers that in today's game just aren't possible. The power was great, but the average hitting and the doubles, total bases, he was the NL hit king for a long time before Pete Rose passed him. And honestly, Stan Musial just doesn't get the respect that he deserves outside of St. Louis. And I hope all of you that aren't familiar with Stan Musial or his story, go and check it out, because his numbers are insane before you even mention that he missed a season and a half with military service right in the early prime of his career. We round home plate here, and this is a story that really made me feel old and was crazy to watch last night. But Yuri Perez, the top prospect for the Miami Marlins, got called up from Double-A Pensacola to start last night against the Cincinnati Reds. So he made the jump from Double-A to the major leagues at 20 years old, the second youngest pitcher to debut in the last 25 years. Julio Urias of the Los Angeles Dodgers is actually the youngest, who debuted at 19. And every time I see a Julio Urias stat, I get more and more impressed with the kid. Clayton Kershaw has said it many times before, but he is the next Dodgers ace, and he's got amazing stuff. But Yuri Perez, the first Major League Baseball player to debut who was born in 2003. That is just crazy to me. There's not many players still playing that were even in the minor leagues in 2003. But Yuri Perez going out there as a 20-year-old, the jump from Double-A to Triple-A is huge, let alone to the major leagues against a Cincinnati roster that's pretty solid, young team. And to go out there 4 2/3 innings, he only gave up 2 runs, which were both solo shots. And he looked good, man. Half of his outs were strikeouts, and they've already said that he's earned a second start this upcoming Friday. So if you get a chance to tune into the Marlins this Friday, Yuri Perez is worth watching, man. Super talented young kid who I've talked about this with the 2-pitch ace last week. He's got more than 2 pitches, but the 2-pitch ace factor with the new rules, being able to work fast and get things done, it allows players to debut faster than you would have thought. And hey, we need a couple starts. This guy's got good stuff. He might not have developed his 3rd pitch fully yet, but if he can throw those first 2 pitches for strikes, he's going to give us a chance to win this game. And the Marlins didn't win the game against the Reds, but Yuri Perez gave them a chance to win the game. He did not factor into the decision. The bullpen blew it later on in the game. They lost 7-4. But Yuri Perez is, I think, a great example of how baseball will continue to get infused with young talent. And I think it's really exciting, especially seeing a pitcher. You love to see the really talented people going there and making a name for themselves. And I think Yuri Perez is a name to watch. The Miami Marlins have very much been in that 500 baseball conversation. That Luis Ariz trade looks like a win-win, but on the Marlins side, Sandy Alcantara has taken a step back despite a really nice start in his last outing. Overall, he's taken a step back this season. And the pitching behind Sandy, Jesus Luzardo's been okay, but it hasn't been amazing pitching-wise, and I think Yuri Perez could be just what this team needs to give it a spark to maybe push to be an above 500 team this season. Hopefully some of their bats wake up, and maybe, just maybe, the Marlins actually buy someone at the deadline instead of sell them. That would be crazy to see. But you saw them go and buy Luis Ariz, a batting champion who was a lot cheaper than people would have thought. And now they got a 20-year-old kid that's throwing gas for strikes to kind of have the fans wrap their arms around the kid and see where you can take him. I appreciate you guys listening as always. You can follow me on Twitter at DominicMana44 for more baseball content. I hope that we see a lot more solo shot swag this upcoming week. It's been awesome to keep track of all that stuff. If you're wondering where I get that information, go check out onlyhomers.com, where you won't just see how many runners were on base during the home run. You will see the inning, the pitcher was off of, the exit velocity, the distance, and the date. Really awesome stuff. Great resource. And I really appreciate them letting me use their resource to tabulate my solo shot swag counter. I will catch you guys in the next one.